Once upon a time, in a quaint American town, I lived a life that was nearly perfect, or so I believed. My name is Karen, and I want to tell you about the family I thought I knew. We were the very picture of the American dream. A modest house with a white picket fence, windows adorned with colorful curtains, and a yard where laughter filled the air. Kitchen, a place where Sunday morning pancakes were a ritual and bedtime stories were a promise never broken. My husband, Martin, was the sort of man you could rely on. Steady, affectionate, with the humor that made everyday life sparkle. Our son Tommy was a 9-year-old bundle of joy. His laughter like music, his curiosity endless. He'd run through the house with a toy airplane, dreaming of adventures, while our dog, Buddy, would chase him, barking merrily. Then there was Agnes, Martin's mother, a constant presence, often visiting us with homemade cookies and tales of the old days. Her eyes would twinkle as she'd play with Tommy, teaching him card tricks or reading him stories of knights and dragons. Our home was a symphony of love, trust, and simple pleasures. Dinners were loud, filled with talk about our day's plans for vacations or Tommy's latest achievements at school. We'd celebrate birthdays with homemade cakes and laughter, the candles reflecting the glow in our eyes. But as the seasons changed, so did life in ways I could never have predicted. Our happiness was genuine, but it was built on a foundation that was about to crack. "Martin, life is good, isn't it, Carrie?" Martin said one spring evening, his voice carrying that familiar comfort. "It's perfect," I answered, not noticing the shadow in his eyes or the hidden tremor in his voice. That was the calm before the storm, the last breath of normality before our world would turn upside down. The perfect family was an illusion, a beautiful picture soon to be shattered by a truth that was lurking, unseen, in the very heart of our home. But at that moment, as the sun set and the fragrance of blooming flowers filled the air, everything seemed flawless. I held my family close, unaware that the seeds of betrayal had already been sown, and a storm was brewing on the horizon. In retrospect, I realized that perfection is fragile, and appearances can be deceiving. But back then, in the sanctuary of our family, I was blissfully ignorant of the trials that awaited us. Little did I know, the real story was about to begin. Life has a curious way of reminding us of its unpredictable nature, of teaching us lessons when we least expect them. The second chapter of our story opened with an unforeseen tragedy that hit like a bolt from the blue. My mother, a gentle soul with a heart as big as the sky, had always been the anchor of our family. Her wisdom, her laughter, and her unwavering support were my pillars. Her disease was cruel, rare, and relentless, striking without warning and consuming her in a matter of months. I remember the call from the doctor, his voice hesitant and heavy with regret. "Dr. Zakarin," he began, "I'm afraid your mother's condition is more serious than we thought." Straight the room spun around me, and I clung to the back of a chair, my mind refusing to accept what I was hearing. "A rare disease," he said. "No cure," he said. "A matter of time," he said. "No, not my mother. What now?" But life was not listening to my pleas. It continued its relentless march, leaving me and my family in a storm of disbelief and sorrow. Tommy would often ask, "When is Grandma coming home, Mommy?" His innocent eyes searched mine for reassurance, a reassurance I couldn't give. "Grandma's very sick, sweetheart," I'd say, choking back tears. "But she loves you very much." Martin and Agnes were supportive, holding me as I cried, trying to keep a sense of normality for Tommy's sake. But a shadow had fallen over our home, a chill that no amount of warmth could dispel. The days turned into weeks, and my mother's condition worsened. Visiting her in the hospital became a routine, a painful ritual filled with hope and despair. Her once vibrant eyes dimmed, her laughter replaced by a painful silence. Yet, even in her weakest moments, my mother's spirit remained unbroken. "Take care of Tommy," she'd whisper, squeezing my hand. "He's a special boy." "Norman, I will." "Mom, I'd promise," my voice breaking. "Person'll make you proud." Her smile was my solace, a glimmer of light in the dark. And then, one cold winter morning, she was gone. The call came, and I knew before I even picked up the phone. My mother had left us, her battle over, her pain at an end. The funeral was a blur of tears, eulogies, and hugs from friends and family. We said our goodbyes, each of us carrying a piece of her in our hearts. And in her will, she left Tommy a generous inheritance of $300,000, a testament to her love and foresight. I decided to place the money in a safe, a sacred trust for Tommy's future. But what I didn't know was that the money would become the catalyst for a series of events that would tear apart the very fabric of our family. The storm was coming, and the cracks in our perfect life were beginning to show. As the last guests left the funeral, I stood by my mother's grave, a sense of foreboding settling over me. Our story was far from over, and the real struggle was only just beginning. Spring arrived with a hint of renewal, but the warmth of the season couldn't thaw the chill that had settled over our family since my mother's passing. The echoes of her laughter still lingered in the corners of our home, and Tommy's questions about his grandma were a constant, painful reminder of what we'd lost. The money she left Tommy, that significant sum of $300,000, was more than just an inheritance. It was a symbol of her love, a promise for his future, and I was determined to keep it safe until he was old enough to make wise decisions. But as the weeks went by, I began to notice subtle changes in Martin and Agnes. Whispers behind closed doors, sidelines a growing interest in the inheritance that I couldn't quite understand. "Martin, Karen, darling," Martin began one evening, his voice cautious. "Have you thought about what we should do with Tommy's money? Maybe investing it would be a good idea." I looked up from the dishes, surprised by the suggestion. "Pardon me? Investing? I thought we agreed to keep it safe for Tommy." Martin's eyes flickered, and he exchanged a quick glance with Agnes. I felt a twinge of unease. Agnes chimed in, her voice sweet but insistent. "The Agnes, but think of the possibilities. Darn, we could turn that money into so much more." The conversation left me unsettled, a nagging suspicion growing in my mind. Why were they so interested in Tommy's inheritance? Why now? As the days turned into weeks, the tension in our home grew. Martin and Agnes' interest in the money became more apparent, their suggestions more insistent. They talked about investments, business opportunities, a chance to make the most of what Tommy had been left. But their words rang hollow, their smiles forced, and I found myself doubting their intentions. I felt a growing distance between Martin and me, a barrier that hadn't been there before. Ami, sensitive as he was, sensed the change too. "Tommy and Mommy, why is Daddy so grumpy?" He'd ask, his eyes wide with concern. Arguments became more frequent, our conversations laced with bitterness and suspicion. I found myself locking the safe, something I never thought I'd do. Trust was eroding, and with it the foundation of our family was crumbling. The perfect picture we had painted was cracking, the vibrant colors fading into shades of doubt and fear. The storm was gathering strength, and I could feel it in my bones. But the worst was yet to come. The betrayal, the deceit, and the unraveling of everything I thought I knew were waiting just around the corner. I wish I could say I saw it coming. I wish I could say I was prepared. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. The innocence of childhood has a way of seeing through the veils adults create. It was a summer morning when the truth that had been lurking in the shadows finally came into the light, exposed by the unassuming eyes of my 9-year-old son. Tommy had always been fascinated by technology, and one of his treasured possessions was a small video camera he'd received for his birthday. He'd film his toys, our dog Buddy, and sometimes our family during dinner or playtime. I'd never thought much of it until the day he stumbled upon a truth that would shatter our lives. "Tommy, Mommy, look what I made!" Tommy exclaimed, running into the kitchen, his eyes bright with excitement. I turned from the stove, smiling at his enthusiasm. "At me, Watson Spiman, what is it, sweetheart?" He handed me his camera, his little chest puffing with pride. "Tommy, I made a movie." There he is. I played the video, expecting to see one of his usual creations. But what I saw made my heart stop in my chest and my blood turn to ice. The footage was shaky, taken from behind a slightly ajar door. There on the small screen was our family safe, the one that held Tommy's inheritance. And there, chilling clarity, was Martin working the combination with a focused expression. Picture Agnes watching over his shoulder? My mind refused to accept what I was seeing. It couldn't be. Martin.
What's Daddy doing? Mommy, it's documentary.
I looked into his innocent eyes, and something inside me broke. The betrayal was real, the deceit laid bare. My husband and his mother had been plotting behind my back, their greed unveiled by the very child they'd betrayed. My hands were shaking as I replayed the video, the image of Martin's face, his cold determination etching itself into my mind. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place, the whispers, the glances, the growing tension. With a clarity that was both enlightening and devastating. I understood what had been happening. They wanted the money. They were willing to steal from their own flesh and blood. I hugged Tommy close, my tears falling onto his hair, my body racked with sobs. "Tommy, it's okay. Mommy," he whispered, his little arms wrapped around me. "Don't cry." But how could I not cry? The world I thought I knew had been ripped apart. The trust I'd placed in Martin and Agnes shattered into a million pieces. That night, after Tommy was in bed, I confronted Martin, the video playing in the background, a damning testament to his betrayal. "How could you?" I screamed, my voice filled with rage and disbelief. "How could you do this to us?" To Tommy, Martin's face went pale, his eyes wide with shock and guilt. Agnes stood behind him, her face a mask of feigned innocence. "Martin, it's not what it looks like." "Karen," Martin stammered, his voice trembling. "Don't lie to me," I yelled, my whole body shaking. "You were going to steal from our son." The room was filled with tension, accusations, and tears. The words were a blur, the explanations hollow, the apologies meaningless. The man I thought I knew was a stranger, his love a lie, his promises broken. Agnes, the grandmother who had played with Tommy, who had baked cookies and read stories, was a part of the deceit, her kindness a facade. The storm had hit and our family was torn apart. There was no going back, no repairing what had been broken. The greed that had been lurking in the shadows had been unveiled, and with it, the very soul of our family had been laid bare. At night, as I lay in bed, the house filled with an eerie silence. I knew that our story had taken a dark and irrevocable turn. The battle had begun, and I was ready to fight for Tommy, for my mother's memory, and for the truth. There would be no forgiveness, no understanding, no second chances. The lines were drawn, and I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was on my own. The dawn of the next day arrived, but its light could not penetrate the heavy gloom that had settled over our home. The walls that had once resonated with warmth and joy now seemed to close in, suffocating and lifeless. I spent the morning in a state of numb disbelief, replaying the events of the previous night. Martin's guilty face, Agnes's cold eyes. The betrayal cut deep, a wound that would not heal. I knew I had to act to protect Tommy's future and to ensure that justice was done. But the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, and the fight would not be easy. How do you battle those you once loved? How do you find the strength to confront those who had been your family? The answer lay in Tommy's trusting eyes, his innocence, his belief in me. He was the reason for everything, the heart of my determination. I would fight for him, no matter the cost. I started by consulting a lawyer, explaining the situation and showing him the video evidence. He was shocked by the brazenness of Martin and Agnes's actions, but confident that the evidence was strong. "Lawyer, Karen, we have a solid case here," he assured me. "This video is damning, but this won't be easy. Are you prepared for what's to come?" I looked him in the eyes, my resolve unwavering. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect my son." And over the following weeks, the legal process unfolded, a slow and agonizing journey through a system that seemed indifferent to the pain and betrayal I felt. Papers were filed, statements taken, lawyers consulted. Martin and Agnes, their true natures exposed, were unrepentant, defiant even. They hired their own attorneys, and the battle lines were drawn. Through it all, I clung to Tommy, our bond strengthening in the face of adversity. He was my rock, my reason to keep fighting, even when the days were darkest. "Tommy, Mommy, will everything be okay?" He would ask, his little face filled with worry. I would hug him close, my voice firm but gentle. "Everything will be okay, sweetheart. I promise." The court hearings loomed, a daunting prospect that filled me with both determination and dread. Friends and family rallied around us, their support a lifeline in a sea of turmoil. But the battle was taking its toll. The strain was evident in Tommy's behavior, his once carefree spirit replaced by anxiety and confusion. I found myself looking over my shoulder, mistrust and suspicion clouding my every interaction. Our home, once filled with love, was now a battleground, each room a reminder of the deceit and greed that had torn us apart. As the court date approached, I found myself reflecting on everything that had led us to this point. The happy memories were tainted, the love I'd felt for Martin replaced by anger and disgust. I knew that the road ahead would be long and painful, that the scars would never truly heal. But I also knew that I had the strength to face it, to fight for my son's future, to reclaim our lives. There was no turning back, no room for doubt. The battle had begun, and I was ready. For Tommy, for justice, for myself. I was a mother, and I would not be defeated. The courtroom was a sterile, imposing place filled with dark wood and solemn faces. It was a world away from the warmth of home, a stark reminder of how far we'd come. The trial began with a bang, the opening statement setting the tone for what would be a tense and grueling process. Lawyer or client? Karen is a victim of betrayal by those closest to her. A mother who sought only to protect her son's future, now forced to fight for justice. My lawyer began, his voice filled with conviction. Biden's lawyer? Objection. Biden's lawyer interjected. We have yet to see concrete evidence of these so-called betrayals. The judge waved him down. Budge, continue. Martin was a shell of the man I'd once known. His eyes hollow, his face drawn. Yes, Agnes, for her part, seemed almost defiant, her posture rigid, her gaze unyielding. I took the stand, my voice trembling but clear. Me, I trusted them. I loved them. Ishinabe betrayed me. They stole from my son, from his future. Martin's lawyer was relentless, probing and prodding, trying to find a crack in my armor. Martin's lawyer, isn't it true, Mrs. Johnson, that you were aware of your husband's financial difficulties? That this entire situation could have been a misunderstanding? Me, no, I shot back, anger rising. There's no misunderstanding in theft and betrayal. The video was played, the images stark and unyielding. Tommy's innocence captured on film, the shocking reality laid bare for all to see. The days turned into weeks, the strain taking its toll on all of us. Tommy's anxiety grew, his nights filled with nightmares, his days shadowed by fear. Tommy, will Daddy go to jail? Tommy, he asked one night, his voice small and scared. Emmy, I don't know, sweetheart, but I'm here for you, always. The trial seemed to drag on forever, each day a battle, each testimony a skirmish. The lawyers clashed, the judge presided, and we all waited, the future hanging in the balance. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the closing arguments were made, the case presented to the jury. Lawyer, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we have seen the evidence. We have heard the testimonies. This is a case of greed, of betrayal, of a mother's love pitted against a husband's treachery. My lawyer concluded, his voice ringing with conviction. The jury was sent away, the waiting began. Hours turned into days, the tension building, the outcome uncertain. I spent the time with Tommy trying to distract him, to bring some normalcy back to our lives. But the shadow of the trial loomed large, its verdict a sword hanging over our heads. Finally, the call came. The verdict was in. I sat in the courtroom, my hands clenched, my breath shallow. The jury filed in, their faces inscrutable, their decisions sealed. The judge turned to them, his voice solemn. Judge, has the jury reached a verdict? Which jury? We have... But, Your Honor... The room was silent, the air thick with anticipation. The moment had come, the truth about to be revealed. The judge turned to the jury foreperson. Judge, what say you? Patrice, we find the defendants, Martin Johnson and Agnes Johnson, guilty as charged. The words echoed in the room, a shockwave of realization, relief, and vindication. Justice had been served. The battle was won. The verdict marked the end of a chapter, but the beginning of a new journey. The justice system had done its part. The responsibility now lay with me to rebuild our lives. Tommy's relief was palpable, his smile returning, his spirit brightening. But the shadows of the past lingered, the scars a reminder of the battle we'd fought. The days following the trial were filled with legal formalities, the compensation to be arranged, the divorce proceedings to be initiated. Martin's one-year jail sentence was a hollow victory, the punishment seeming inadequate for the betrayal. Agnes, too, seemed untouched, her wealth protecting her, her arrogance undiminished. But I was not deterred. The fight had changed me, hardened me. I was no longer the naive wife, the trusting daughter-in-law. I was a warrior, a mother, a survivor. The divorce was a formality, the papers signed with a sense of finality, the marriage a distant memory. The compensation, however, proved to be a battle. Agnes's lawyers fighting tooth and nail, dragging the process out, turning it into a war of attrition. But I was prepared, my resolve unshaken. I fought for justice. I would fight for what was rightfully Tommy's. The months dragged on, the legal battle a constant reminder of the treachery, the greed, the pain, to endure it all. Tommy and I grew closer, our bond strengthening, our love deepening. We found joy in simple things, laughter in unexpected places, hope in each other. Friends and family rallied around us, their support a lifeline, their love a balm. Slowly, we began to heal, to move forward, to rebuild. The house, once a battleground, became a sanctuary, a place of love and warmth. Tommy thrived, his resilience a testament to his strength, his innocence a beacon of hope. And I found myself again, the woman I'd been before the betrayal, but stronger, wiser, more determined. Finally, after a long and arduous battle, the compensation was secured. Agnes's wealth unable to shield her from justice. The money was placed in a trust for Tommy, his future secure, his inheritance protected. We celebrated, not for the victory, but for the freedom, the end of a chapter, the beginning of a new life.